Welcome to Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong, the podcast in which Josh and Sean discuss life, love, mental health, pop culture, music, politics, and a whole lot more. In this episode, we spend time chatting about ADHD medication shortages in the UK, how organised sports exclude people by design, and Sean's day out watching a vegan rugby team in action. Enjoy the ride.
Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong. I am Josh, one of the co-hosts, and next to me is Sean. Hello Sean, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing all right. I'm a bit rushed, as you are, but it's a busy day. How's your day been?
We're both having one of those days, I think. Could it be the planetary alignments? I know how much you love all that sort of talk.
Yeah, I know, right? What's that saying that English people say when they're having a bad day and they say, I'm having a mare? What does that mean?
Mare. I think it's short for nightmare, isn't it? Having a mare.
Is it? Or is a mare a type of animal? Is it?
A mare is a female horse.
So I thought it might be some sort of sexist thing, like, like you're having a sort of like, excuse my language, but for this, but having a sort of a bitch of a day or something.
Yeah, I never thought of that. I always assumed it was just a contraction of nightmare.
Oh, I always thought it was the female horse, but
well, let's not do our live on air research like we normally do.
That's become part of our style, isn't it? To do online.
Maybe by default, not by design or demand.
Well, I'm not sure there's demand for much of anything really, but
do you want to tell me and tell our listeners why you're having a mare of a day?
Just incredibly busy, and I just jumped off a meeting, and I was having a meeting for my role as with the charity that I work for. I work for a charity called Made in Hackney. I think I've mentioned it before, but I couldn't get this meeting to end. And normally people in the business world are very good at stopping meetings when they're stopping, and you're normally good at wrapping up with a few minutes to go, and then you've got like 1 or 2 minutes for pleasantries. But this was like right to the wire, and I was trying to get off because we had this appointment to record this, and then on top of that, a million other things happening as well. Like I worked all weekend, and it's Monday now. We're recording on a Monday, and it's just been busy. Why are you having a mare?
I'm just having. I don't even know how to get into it really, but can I overshare? Is that allowed?
Yeah,
I mean it's our podcast, I suppose. Anyway, I mean I'm having trouble getting hold of my ADHD medication. There is a national shortage, and my doctor's just not being particularly helpful. Normally I get it from my local pharmacy, but they didn't have it, and none of the local pharmacies had it in stock. So last week I was frantically calling around other pharmacies near where I work, and I found a pharmacy that had one in stock, but they said, we'll need a prescription. We can't hold it for you without a prescription. So then it's the sort of rigmarole of then contacting my GP and asking them, can they issue a prescription for this? But it's somewhat urgent because there's only one available at this one pharmacy. And, they didn't send it. That was Thursday. They only sent the prescription this morning. They sent it to the wrong pharmacy. The pharmacy that I'm going to, hopefully, touch wood, get this prescription from are just, they're very, I don't know, they're just not very customer focused, let's put it that way. It takes you about, and I'm not exaggerating when I say about 15 phone calls to actually get someone to pick up. And so it's just.
Are they located far from you?
They're sort of near Richmond. Okay. So it's not that far, but I have to get there, and then I've got another appointment in Hammersmith that I've got to get to by 4. So it's just all a bit rushed. So if I seem a little flustered, that might be why.
Are you in a right flap?
Not in a right flap. I'm beginning to flap.
Okay. Are you out of medication? Is that why it's such an emergency?
Not quite. I've got a few days left, so
But can't you go like one day on your way to work? 'Cause you work in that sort of direction, don't you? Or
I do, but I don't. It's the process of getting hold of ADHD medication is just so difficult. It's such a gamble. I don't want to risk it because when I finally spoke to them this afternoon, and they said they did have the prescription, they said, but you'll need to come in and get it very soon. And I said, oh, well, it's got my name on it now, has it? And they said, yes, but you'll need to come in, which I'm not sure that's an ethical. I think if you've got a prescription with your name on it, I don't think they should be giving it to anyone else. But that was
they might be selling it to the highest bidder.
they were sort of, it was very much implied that if I didn't get in there toot sweet, as Kath Day Knight would say, I may not get it. So it's very stressful, and my GP is just not particularly helpful.
Do you get stressed by the idea of running out of the medication?
I do.
What does that feel like to you?
It feels like, I don't really drink anymore, and you don't drink, but when you would have one of those like just wild drinking binges, and you had to go to work the next day like so hungover that you couldn't. Although saying that, I think sometimes even with a hangover there would be a sort of rhythm you could get into, depending on what type of work you're doing, obviously. But without my ADHD medication, I'm not very good employee. I don't function very well.
It was one of the topics I was thinking about talking about today. You just sort of briefly touched on, is when you have to go to work or you have to do something, but you're not completely well, and how you manage. And that could be whatever, like you're hungover or you're ill.
If it includes mental illness, that could be my whole life. But yeah.
But because, I've had a bit of an upset tummy, and I had to go and run this market stall on the weekend on little more than an Imodium and a prayer. It was like, I was like, really.
This really is the episode of oversharing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it was like I needed to be near a toilet, and I had to carry so much stall equipment to do the stall, and I had to go on the tube. And do you know
where's this story going? This is
no, I didn't like
you didn't
evacuate the dance floor.
You weren't shooting the shit on the tube.
No, I wasn't having a mare on the underground. But
okay,
do you know when your body is struggling with something like needing to go to the toilet, like, and you sweat, you get the sweats on. So I was carrying like a backpack that weighed about 30 kilos. I was carrying like a banner, a chair, like an IKEA stool, all this stuff. And I didn't have one spare hand. And I was carrying all this. I had to walk down the steps at the station, get on the tube, like trying to even get my phone out to tap in at the gates was like excruciating. And then I got to King's Cross where I was setting up the stall. And do you know how huge that station is and how spread out everything is?
Complete maze.
So I had to get off the Circle Line and get over to where that Waitrose is next to Central St. Martin's.
Yeah, that's a long way.
I don't know if I'm exaggerating, but it felt like a 10-minute walk. And like the feeling that, what if I just shit myself? Like, here, what would I do? Would I just like lie down on the ground and go to sleep? Because I was also so tired because I'd had such a bad tummy all through the night. I had about 30 minutes sleep, that was split up. And so I was exhausted and I wasn't eating, so I had no energy. But then I was also like, it was horrible. But I had to go and then run this stall for a couple of hours on my own before a colleague could come and take over. And somehow I managed to engage with people and be nice to people and smile and talk about the charity. And it got me thinking about that when we talked to Wendy Turner Webster about how she was saying that her and her friend had this saying where...
And you better just explain who she is to listeners and viewers if they don't know who she is.
Wendy Turner Webster is an animal rights advocate and also a TV personality here in the UK. She used to host some show, was it like Animal Hospital or Pet Rescue
Oh,
or
I thought you were going to talk about the craft one. She did the
what's that?
didn't maybe she didn't. Didn't she present a sort of a craft show or something
Oh
to
yeah,
do?
but that was like I'm talking from a mainstream audience
Oh,
point of
right.
view.
Okay.
That
Okay.
craft show was like a cable TV infomercial or something.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah, no, but
okay.
you know, she used to have like a show on a proper channel that she hosted, and also her sister is a very famous TV presenter,
Hmm.
Anthea Turner, who was, I suppose, most famous around the 90s. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Late 80s, 90s.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I was doing an event with Wendy once, and she talked about when she's not well, and she has to do like a presentation or she has to act on camera. She says Dr. Theatre comes to help her to get her through it. And I
Mm.
suppose she was referring to the adrenaline of
Mm-hmm.
having to perform or put your brave face on,
Yeah.
even if you're not well. And I've always used that term, Dr. Theatre, when I was carrying all of those things to King's Cross, then I had to stand on this stall for a few hours. Dr. Theatre was
So
there.
it's nothing an Imodium and a bit of Dr. Theatre can't cure.
Yeah, like I
Well,
said,
like you've seen me at the queer open mic that we run. You've seen me show up sometimes feeling just like absolutely not at death's door exactly, but just not feeling well at all. And
yeah.
yeah, yeah, as soon as you have to be on show, it does sort of Dr. Theatre comes through. Come through, Dr.
What's
Theatre.
the worst situation you've been in where you've been so incredibly unwell and you've somehow had to pull it together for something?
Do you remember? I mean, I think you were there, but I was so drunk that my no, I'm sure you were there actually. Do you remember this would be about 6 years ago, I think, when we were living in Mexico and it was our friend Hazel's birthday. I don't remember which birthday it was, but anyway, she was having a party at her house, and then we all went out drinking in the Zona Rosa at a gay bar. Do you remember this? You were there, weren't you?
I don't know.
I think I think you were there. Maybe you weren't. I actually don't know. Anyway, I got very drunk very quickly. It was a Friday night, and no, actually, I don't think you were there. But I think I got maybe 2 hours of sleep, and I was teaching English in Mexico City, which was a bit of a joke because it's a job I'm woefully. I was going to say underqualified, but just zero qualifications as an English teacher, apart from speaking English, which I can do most of the time. But I was teaching English in Mexico City, and I had a lesson. I think it was at 10 o'clock on the Saturday morning, and it was a long journey. It was a long way away in Polanco, and I had to go. And it was a really nice student, really nice guy. But I was so drunk still, and I felt on the verge of just throwing up the entire lesson. And I'm sure I must have reeked of alcohol. I mean, it was one of those nights where, you start moderately and then it just descends into tequila shots and yeah, it was a mess. And I just remember I took my iPad. I had nothing prepared because I'm not I'm not an English teacher. I had nothing prepared. I just took my iPad and I just asked the student to use Google Earth and tell me about the town he'd grown up in and show me things. I mean, it was the worst lesson. I mean, I don't know if he may have enjoyed the lesson. I'm not sure, but I felt so ill. And actually, do you remember? No, you hadn't been at the thing the night before, but that Saturday evening, it was our other mutual friend Carlos's birthday party, and I was so ill that you and Hill I'd ordered a cake from what was that little vegan coffee shop? Um,
I
the
don't
really
know. I'm not. I don't think I'm involved in any of this story
no. And
really.
I
But
said to you, I called you and I said I'm so ill. You said to me, "Shall I meet you at Julio and Carlos?" it's their place. Like, shall I meet you there for their party? And I said, please, can you pick the cake up? I'm too ill. And I begged you to like pick the cake up and bring me a coffee from the little coffee shop. So you and Hill came over, and I was so ill at that
I don't
party.
remember that.
Really?
I don't remember that at all.
Okay.
No. But I have quite a lot of stories about alcohol-induced like illness at work or events. I mean, including when I was a school teacher, an actual primary school teacher, where I felt that I was sometimes drunk in the classroom from the night before, which is probably not the most responsible way to be.
From the teachers I know, that would probably be a lot more common than
I think
some people might
somebody
think.
in the school that I worked at, I think somebody previous to my time there they'd found like empty bottles in their cupboard. They'd been drinking on the sly on the school grounds, and they had all these empty bottles in the store.
Would not surprise me at all.
But I mean, apart from alcohol, has there been another time where you've been like unwell, where you've had to push yourself through something?
All the time, I think. Yeah, I think, if you're talking just about sort of physical health, then yeah, I mean, there's been, when I was working at the University of Sydney, I remember I had this horrible like virus that went on for weeks, and I just, every day it was such a struggle. I used to walk to work, but I had to get the bus, even though it was not that far, but I was getting the bus to work, and just getting to work and feeling, when you feel like you're walking underwater when you've got like a really bad sort of ear and sinus infection.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was no fun.
One of the worst times for me was we were running a supper club one night at the Gallery Cafe, and it was like a Mexican themed supper club.
Yeah.
And I was hosting, and I was wearing a Mexican wrestling mask.
Oh yeah.
For that. And I had the worst toothache known to humanity. Like, and this had been a toothache that I hadn't been looking after, and it was like had been ongoing, and I was trying to manage the pain with painkillers across probably weeks or months. And it got to a point where the pain was so bad I thought I was having a heart attack from it. But it got so close to the event that I couldn't do anything about it. And I had to host this event. So I had this Mexican wrestling mask on with the most excruciating tooth pain. So when I was talking to the crowd or chatting, every now and then there'd be the worst pain, like someone had stuck an electric hot knife in my jaw, and it would go all through my body. And so I was trying to like talk, and I was like, all I kept thinking was, thankfully I have this mask on because people can't see. I was like pulling faces, like just like reacting, like almost like my body was going into spasm from this pain. And I eventually got through the night, and no painkillers were working. Like nothing I could take was working. And then I had to go to that emergency dentist appointment and get help. But that was one of the worst, where I had to really call on Dr. Theatre and all of their colleagues and like medical assistants and nurses, and because I was not capable of being there. And I honestly thought I was going to die that night from the pain. It was so bad.
That's awful.
And there was, back to alcohol again, when I used to work at that department store in Australia, in Brisbane, and in the shoe department, and I had to go to work drunk, sometimes not even going to bed at all. And would just like lie down out the back. Like we had where all the shoes were kept out the back, we would call the reserves, and we would sometimes just have big like piles of sale shoes, like not in boxes anymore. And I would go there and like have to lie down, face down in these shoes because I just couldn't go out on the shop floor. But
it reminds me of when I had COVID. I don't know, 2 years ago, I think it was, and I mean it wasn't awful, but I just remember after I stopped testing positive for COVID and I went back to work, and I was just so exhausted that because I drive to work, I would go in my lunch break and just get into my car and just absolutely going straight into the deepest sleep. And, I would just sort of set an alarm. I would wake up like just completely out of it, like mouth wide open, just so exhausted, and then have to like drag myself back to work after my lunch break. It was awful. But that went on for about a week.
But isn't it funny, like how when, when you know that you have you ever got to the point where Doctor Theatre can't even help you, where you go, okay, there, this is something that I can't do anymore.
Yeah, and all you
Like
can
I was
do is
like,
crawl into bed. I mean,
well, or like go to hospital, like when I had
well,
COVID, because I was very much of the mind where like, oh yeah, I'll just keep on with stuff and positive thinking, and I'll rest for a bit. But
Nam
it got
Yoho Renge Kyo.
what's that?
Nam Yoho Renge Kyo.
What's that?
That's it's the Buddhist chant. It's that okay. That's a whole nother story then.
I don't know that.
Okay.
But yeah, like with COVID, it got to the point where there is something seriously wrong with me. I need to go to a hospital. Or when I had pneumonia and I had to go to hospital,
Mm,
it gets to a point where there's something in your body that sends a signal to your brain was like, okay, that's it. That's your limit.
mm, mm.
But when you're hungover or, even if you've just got a mild cold or a flu, you know that you can kind of push yourself through it. You don't want to,
Yeah,
but you
yeah.
can push yourself through it if you have to.
I
But
I was just thinking about the time when I'm scared to even bring it up because I don't want to tempt fate. But again, I'm touching a lot of wood today. But I haven't had gout in a long time, but there was a period where I did have it a lot. I suppose when I was a bit heavier, when I was drinking. But the first time I had gout, I don't know what year it was, but we had to drive to VegFest in Bristol, and luckily it was in my left foot, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to drive. But I just had this excruciating pain in my left foot, and having never had gout before, I didn't know what it was. But we had to go to this bloody VegFest thing in Bristol, so I drove there, and I could barely walk. Do you remember? I was sort of like hobbling, and I could barely put my left foot down on the ground. It was excruciating pain. I couldn't even have like a thin sheet over my foot at night when I slept because the pain. Anyway, and I I remember it went on for about 4 days, and I said, I've got to go to the hospital. I can't bear this pain anymore. There must be something broken. And I went to Hammersmith Hospital. Do you remember this? What year this would have been?
yeah,
I was working at the university, and anyway, I went to Hammersmith Hospital and I saw this young sort of triage nurse, and he was Australian, and I explained my symptoms. He said, well, let me have a look. And he looked at my foot and he pointed to some sort of little red mark. And I mean, it was barely anything. I think it was just where my shoelace had been tied a bit. Well, I don't know what it was. And he said, oh, it looks like a spider bite, mate. And I was like, we don't really have spiders in this country that bite you. It's not really a thing. As you go, yeah, you do. And I was like, okay. And I was like, when a medical professional tells you something with such certainty, you
but did he
believe them.
really speak like that, or are you doing this for
No,
comedic
he really
effect?
did. He was like this, young oka. Anyway, um,
So his whole like the premise for him was that if your foot is slightly red and hurting, nine
and
times out of 10 it's a
and
spider bite.
impossible to walk on. So yeah, he prescribed me antibiotics for an infected spider's bite, and I was just like, this is bonkers. I've never heard of anyone having a spider bite in the UK. But I took the antibiotics for a couple of days, and by this point, I remember it was a Friday. Excuse me, it was a Friday morning, and I'd been going into town on the tube. Um, it was just excruciating pain. I think I'd started using my grandma. I think my grandma had died at this point, and I was using her old walking stick to get around.
Elsie's,
uh,
Emma's,
yeah, Emma's
Emma's walking
walking stick.
stick.
And on the Friday, I was like, I can't. I can physically cannot. No matter how many painkillers I take, I can't go to work in central London. I can't get the tube. My foot is so excruciatingly painful. So I went to a different hospital, A&E, And it was a Friday before a bank holiday weekend, and I went in, and it took hours because, quite rightfully, it's not a medical emergency. I mean, this was an A&E department where they had people coming in from really severe accidents and car crashes and stuff like that. So I had to wait hours and hours, and they sent me for an X-ray. The X-ray came back. I was there for about 4 hours. They sent me for an X-ray. The X-ray came back with nothing. They said it's not a spider bite. They just said they very dismissive of that very quickly, and I was like, yeah, I know. And I remember the nurse said to me, we can't see anything wrong. And I said, well, why can't I walk? Why can I not put any pressure on my left foot? And she just shrugged. She shrugged and said, I don't know, maybe call your doctor. And I was bereft. I was just in such agony, and it had been going on for so long. And I called my doctor, and I was actually in tears. I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm in such agony. I've been to 2 A&Es.
Which GP was it? The one in Chiswick? Oh.
No, the one, is it Ealing Park? The one on South Ealing Road.
Oh.
Ealing Park Health Centre? That one?
I've got history with them.
Well, yeah. Anyway, sorry, this is a very long-winded story, but I walked into they said, oh, look, come in. Can you come in now? And I said, yes. And I think I got an Uber there. And I walked in, I hobbled in with my nana's walking stick. And the GP just looked up from her desk and she said, oh, do you have gout? And just without even asking me a single question, she just looked at me and said, do you have gout? And I was like, what's that? I just didn't know.
Did you have ever had this pain before in your life previous to this?
No.
But your dad has had gout a lot, right?
Yeah, he had it a lot when we were living in Australia, so I never really...
And did your brother ever have gout?
I think he might have had it once, but only in a big toe or something. It wasn't in sort of one of the... I think I'll have to ask him, actually. But anyway, so she just said, yeah, it sounds and looks exactly like gout, what you're describing and what I can see. And so she prescribed me, there's a medication which you take to sort of flush the uric acid crystals out, and she gave me some very strong codeines or something like that. Anyway, and it was gone within about 2 days. But yeah,
is that what started your love affair with codeine?
Possibly, actually, yeah.
Codeine, the codependency.
Codeine pendency.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, sorry, that was a very long-winded story, and I do love our NHS, but sometimes it really does fall short of.
Oh yeah, yeah, like some of the stories that I've had where you just can't believe somebody is saying what they're saying to you. But I suppose if they're treating tens of millions of people a year, some things are going to slip through the cracks, especially if they're underfunded and overworked. But talking about hobbling, I went to and walking with assistants. I went to watch a rugby game yesterday, and it was I suppose what do you call it when it's not like in a main competition, but there are 2 teams, like an exhibition match? Like that term?
I know nothing about any sport. So,
well, like if you go and watch, it's not like Wimbledon, but there are people playing and they're still competing.
Friendly?
Yeah, it's like a friendly or an exhibition match, I think it's the term. And it was between the world's first vegan rugby union team.
Okay.
And Richmond.
What are they called, the vegan team?
The Green Gazelles.
Where are they based?
I don't know. I actually don't know where they're based. And I don't know if they have a home ground or anything. I think, this was at the Richmond Rugby Club. And so the team they were playing was Richmond Rugby. And the way, we used to go and watch rugby league sometimes in Australia, but the way that these people hit each other on the field and run into each other, and so many of them had to limp off the field, or be helped off the field. And I was like, why do humans do this to each other or to themselves? And it was fascinating to watch. And I like the idea of a vegan sports team kind of. It's a little bit naff.
I've got to say, I really don't like it. But I mean, yeah, I mean, you mentioned a few episodes ago, well, you mentioned it in a couple of episodes about your distaste of the Olympics.
Hmm.
And I think that my ideas around sort of like professional sports and stuff are probably along the same lines of what you were thinking in regards to the Olympics. This sort of like this group mentality that people get. I don't have anything against sports, you know, per se, but it's just the whole sort of culture that builds up around it. I find it a bit problematic. But
Yeah, I like the idea of a vegan sports team from an activist or outreach point of view, that somebody who's interested in rugby will might come across veganism and think about, like this whole event yesterday was centered around the climate and how the choice to eat less meat and more plants is kinder and more eco-friendly. So there were people who were just like typical rugby going audience members who were there to watch the Richmond team, but they were being exposed to things that they might never be exposed to. So from an activist and an awareness point of view, I like that. Similarly to the vegan football slash soccer team, the Forest Green Rovers, so that their home ground is a completely vegan, eco-friendly home ground. So all the catering is plant-based. They have renewable energy. It's a real education, not just entertainment.
mm,
And so I do like that. But yeah, most organized sport is problematic for lots of ways. It's tied to classism. It's especially sports like rugby. It's tied to sexism and misogyny. So men get paid more than women, and men's teams are more celebrated. It also, yeah, links to paternalism and then in turn racism on a broader scale and racial identity. So yeah, sports can be very problematic and they're violent
mm.
and they can be exploitative of the the players. So often companies that own sports teams get rich, and then the players who get injured and then have lifelong injuries and the side
And
effects of that aren't sort of what do you call it, like compensated fairly for
no.
the danger they put themselves in.
And there are the physical injuries, as in sort of joints and limbs and stuff like that. But there's so much sort of discourse now about the long-term brain injuries that some contact sports uh, involve. Uh, Rugby, stuff where it can be very, and obviously boxing. I mean, that's the most obvious one. But the long-term sort of brain injury effects, which may not be apparent, when the athlete is actually during in their prime and playing the sport, but later on in life. But yeah, I think
I have never ever been attracted to boxing. Like I could sit and watch a rugby game and I understand the rules somewhat and I can be interested. I understand the rules of boxing, but it is actually repulsive to me that people would punch each other in the face. Like it
it's
just makes no sense to me.
it's very primitive, isn't it? It's
Well, I don't know if primitive is, I don't know. Like, would primitive people have even just stood there and hit each other for no reason?
no, but I suppose it harks back to a more primitive way of resolving conflict, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't appeal to me at all.
I really love Mexican wrestling, lucha libre. I love the theatrics of it. And people do get hurt, but it's not intentional. It's usually accidental that somebody gets hurt. I mean, they're staged performances,
Mm,
and there is a huge element of skill and athleticism in it. But it's generally agreed, I think, who is going to win
mm,
uh, a match or a championship. And I enjoy the good versus evil element of it. I really enjoy the that a lot of it, even though it can be problematic in the way that Mexican culture can be sexist or homophobic, there are queer wrestlers that are celebrated,
Yeah.
or people pretending to be queer wrestlers.
It's a very camp
because it's a
affair.
thing to celebrate. Yeah, extremely camp.
Mm-hmm.
And it also shows that, often working class people are framed as being not very inclusive or welcoming to people who aren't like them or aren't straight cis people.
Mm.
And I think actually the opposite can be true, that you go somewhere like Mexican wrestling and some of the wrestlers who are queer or who stand out for other reasons are often the most celebrated or
Mm-hmm.
adored.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that there isn't violence against queer people in Mexican culture or anywhere, or against women, but it is a way for working class people to show that they are celebratory of people's differences. Did you see that when you went to the lucha, that there was
Yeah.
there wasn't an ideal, like some of the wrestlers were extremely overweight, some are skinny, some are women, some are tall, some are very, very short,
Mm.
some are queer, some are pretending to be queer.
Mm.
To me, it was like a catch-all for Mexican culture.
Mm.
And I just really love that. But is it a sport if it's like rigged?
Yeah, because it's still a display of athleticism, isn't it? But it's a very theatrical sport. It's a sort of crossover, isn't it? It's not purely athletic prowess. It's the whole sort of show you, because the most popular wrestlers are the one that have that, whatever it is about them that sets them apart, sort of a certain mystique, or if they're an exotico, that can be the thing that sets them apart. So,
Are there any other sports that are like that are just really theatrical, like performances?
well, I
But
mean, are you
but
just talking about outside of lucha libre, or sort of that wrestling, like,
yeah,
you
outside
look
of
at
wrestling.
WWE or
Yeah, outside of wrestling. What is there anything else that is kind of like a fix from a point of view of the outcome, but people are still marvel at the athletic prowess of the people involved? Or is that the only
mm,
sport you can think of?
it's the only one I can think of.
I mean, everything else, like swimming. I mean, of course, there's like bribery and things that
Oh
go
yeah,
on,
yeah,
but
they're
people
fixed
purposefully
things, but
want to win, like swimming, tennis, football, rugby,
mm,
archery, anything you can think of. It isn't. I think wrestling is that professional wrestling, not like college wrestling where they're
no,
actually
that's
wrestling.
genuinely
Yeah,
competitive. Yeah, yeah.
so I can't think of any other sport
No, none come to mind.
that does that. Have you ever played a sport like on? I mean, I know that we've played tennis sometimes, like just casually.
Hmm.
But have you ever played a sport ongoing that you've either practiced for or you've competed against other people?
Well, you mean like playing as part of a team, like, or on a regular sort of?
Yeah, or you could do it on your own, like tennis.
No, not really. I mean, I've had periods in my life where I've enjoyed running, but that's, I don't know if that counts. But no, I've never really. I mean, I hated sport. I had an intense dislike of sport and physical education as a young person. So it never, and I don't think my family were particularly sporty. So it wasn't something that was encouraged, or it wasn't something I gravitated towards at all. But
Your
you,
parents never said to you, "Oh, you have to do one sport when you're at school."
well, you had to at school. But I mean, I would just bunk off school or forge sick notes, or um,
Didn't they used to make you go rowing on the Thames?
yeah, I did that once. It was just horrible. It was cold. I think it was maybe October, November. I remember it started snowing while we were on the Thames. I mean, it was just awful. I didn't. Team sports are something which I don't think I will ever, what am I now, 48? I don't think that's ever going to be a part of my life, team sports. I like, it's like even running. People are like, do you want to go for a run together? And I bet, no. Why would I want to do that with someone else there?
But
It's,
what is that? What about that you don't like? Like, what is it?
I, I don't know. I don't know what that is. I think it's
Do you
just
feel like it's a personal thing that you feel vulnerable when you're in that
maybe.
situation?
I'm quite sort of I think I've said this before. I lean quite heavily into sort of introvert territory a lot of the time, and I love the peace and quiet, and I think that's what a lot of people say about exercise. Is it's like a form of meditation, and I think whenever I've, like with the running, for example, whenever I've done it, it's been like that for me. It's been very sort of meditative. I don't want to try and keep up a conversation or have anyone else in my head when I'm doing that. It's me time.
I enjoy. I'm not great at sport, but I enjoy the social aspect of some sports. I
Yeah.
obviously wouldn't play rugby. I'd be terrified. But I've been talking to James about Jimbo. I've been talking to
Mm.
Jimbo about doing badminton together because
All
he
right.
told me randomly the other day that he plays badminton and that in the health center downstairs here, there's badminton courts that I can use. And he said he's got all the equipment for it. And that actually sounds like fun to me. Like
Yeah.
that sounds like a fun thing to do with a friend, like to play badminton. Now, I don't think I'd be pushing myself to be the world's best 50-year-old badminton player, but I think I could enjoy it. And I really used to enjoy playing tennis. Like I
Mm.
liked the sensation of what it felt like to hit the ball and like sometimes winning or sometimes the other person getting a good shot and beating me. Like it was an enjoyable thing to see the skills in action.
Mm.
But yeah, something with a bigger team like football or rugby seems a bit blokey to me as well. There's something about the masculinity of it that doesn't appeal to me,
Mm.
or that toxic masculinity that often goes along with male dominated
Mm.
team
And,
sports.
and that's another aspect of sport which I really don't like. It is overwhelmingly segregated by gender. There are very few sports where um, it's not exclusively male or exclusively female, and I find that quite problematic as well. And I suppose to some extent, understand the reasons surrounding that, the historical reasons, particularly the social historical reasons, and the perhaps the perceived danger reasons. But I do think we've gotten to a point, and I mean, we were talking about trans issues in the last episode, but there's obviously, there's a huge sort of ongoing debate about the inclusion of trans people in sports. And I was actually thinking about this after we recorded our last episode. I was thinking about it, and I was thinking that we've come so far in so many ways as a global society, if you want. But we're still segregating a lot of our sports into men and women when we know. I mean, when we know that being, quote unquote, a man or being a woman doesn't actually mean that you have very much in common at all, apart from perhaps some chromosomes and it's very it excludes trans people.
Yeah,
And
but
and
also it doesn't just exclude trans people.
mm,
It excludes people who don't fit into that very narrow binary of male and female.
well, yeah,
There are
and it's
intersex people. There are people who present or were identified as, say, female at birth, but they have more, I suppose, from a, how do you say it, chromosological chromosome angle,
chromatica. There you go. I'll
with a
go out on that.
chromatica point of view, with maybe sort of biological men, apart from the
Yeah,
genitalia, and so
yeah.
the spectrum of uh, even biological sex. Like, let's
Well,
take gender out of the
the
equation.
binary of biological sex is so inadequate
Yeah,
for the
it's
whole
incorrect.
human
Yeah,
experience. And I
it's
was thinking,
incorrect. Yeah,
particularly in the field of sports, it's so antiquated to say, oh, well, if you're a man, you can play against any other man. If you're a woman, you can play against any other woman. And yet, you can have men that are so physically different to other men. You can have women that are so physically different to other men. And I was thinking, surely it's time now that we can. But the problem is you're going up against a whole history and a whole sort of accepted societal norm of that's just the way we do things. But we should be maybe looking at sports and saying, judging on somebody's weight and height, maybe that's what qualifies them to compete against another opponent, regardless of their gender identity, regardless of their biological sex that they were given at birth. Maybe that's where we should be fighting for, trans inclusion in sports, is to say, well, we need to break down the binary. That's the
Isn't it
problem.
also weird? Isn't it weird that so much celebration is put on somebody running faster than somebody else, or
Well, yeah.
somebody being able to knock someone over, or
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know that it's steeped in history and probably even has roots in evolution
Mm.
and the fight of the survival of the fittest or whatever, but we don't live in that world anymore. As a species,
And
we don't have to live like that, where we say somebody is better than somebody else because they can run faster.
yeah, that's from I suppose a sociological perspective, like the sociology of sports or the psychology of sports. Is it what's it actually about? Is it about dominance? Is that what it's a representation of dominance, isn't it? It's a showing of physical prowess to outdo your competitors and therefore win the prize. And that's what I was saying before about I don't like any sort of team sports like that or competitive sports. I like, maybe not at this point in my life, but other periods, I've liked going out for a run by myself. That I find enjoyable. But the idea of competing against other people and having a winner and a runner-up, or I just find that so problematic. It's a power struggle or a fight for dominance over other people. And
And that ties into the problem of the Olympics, where the
yeah, I
medal
mean,
tally count is used to show which country is superior
oh yeah,
to.
and that then ties into a whole sort of nationalistic, jingoistic kind of narrative around countries, and yeah, it's very problematic. But yeah, the whole division, the whole binary division of sports into men's and women's, I just find so antiquated, outdated, and just it's exclusionary. It's
And so for me, going to watch this rugby yesterday, it was like that. I could see the inherent problem of having an all male rugby team playing another all male rugby team. So there was the benefit or the positives of me seeing eco or vegan activism being
mm,
championed in that sort of setting, but it was also perpetuating the issues with male dominated sports. And
mm.
uh,
The other thing I was going to say earlier actually reminded me that I know what you mean. I know what you're saying about having a vegan rugby team as a form of activism, but there's also a bit of me that sort of cringes a little when I hear it because I think it, and you used to say this a lot about vegan activism, about not seeming like we're a separate island from people, like bridging that divide. And I do think that it's not exactly the same. Maybe it's not a good comparison, but it's sort of when you have like the vegan dating apps or websites, you know, I don't know. I find that a bit weird. I get the idea. Like if I was looking to date, I would think, well, would I like to date another vegan? Probably, but it wouldn't be my number one criterion. But I suppose for some people it is, and that's fine. That's not a judgment as such. But I think it sets us apart a little bit. Maybe it seems, I remember when back in back in the day when we first were vegan and veganism wasn't really well understood, and people used to say to me, "Oh, wouldn't you want to? Would you like to go? I bet you'd love to go live on one of those like vegan communes out in the rainforest." And I just said, "No. I mean, that's my worst nightmare." I just think when you group yourself entirely with other people of the same ideology, you don't get challenged.
If you
And
went to live on one of those rainforest communes, you'd probably actually get real spider bites, and then you wouldn't have to just worry about it being gout. It would be you could get
I'd
like
get,
that doctor, that nurse could come to you and say, actually, that is a
okay,
spider
you've
bite.
been, it's a spider bite, mate.
I think that the rugby team is a social group, and so it's not a professional sports team that is going to play in I don't even know what the name of the Rugby World Cup or whatever the competition is.
Yeah.
I mean, they're so far away from that. It's a social group. So people who are interested in rugby and want to have those interests fulfilled, but they want to do it with like-minded people so they can all talk about, I don't know, sourcing leather-free rugby boots, or they can make sure that their jerseys that they buy are eco-friendly. You know, I think their jerseys are made from recycled plastic bottles. So vegan, isn't it? But or they can get together and put on this fair day where all the food traders are vegan, so their friends and family can come and experience rugby, which they've maybe grown up with and loved and played all through school, but they can do it through a vegan lens. So I think there is value in that, but there's also space to pick apart the actual concept of a rugby team. And
yeah, there's value in it, and there is a value in the activism of it,
yeah,
in hopefully proving that you don't need to eat meat or animal products to play rugby. But I also think there's an inherent danger in just seeming a little fringe, a little.
well, I don't know if danger's maybe not too strong a word, but like these people can then also go off and play on other rugby teams as well.
Yeah.
Like they don't have to then just only play on the vegan rugby team.
No, no.
So like Neil Robertson, who's the vegan snooker player, right? He plays. He's been the world champion, not the vegan world champion. He has been the world champion on a couple of occasions, and he's won many, many titles. So if he wanted to start like a vegan snooker club, so people could get together and like get the vegan shoes or whatever that might entail as a vegan snooker player, I couldn't even imagine. Although, funnily enough, I did go and watch him play snooker in Sheffield at the Crucible. But he could do that, but he could then also go back to the mainstream competition and do that as well.
Yeah.
So I can see, just like I run London Vegan Social, where people want to go and have a drink and meet people. Well, they could do that anywhere. They could go to any social, but they want to meet other vegans or vegan sympathetic people. So you might want to play rugby, or like how I used to help Antonio run the vegan board game afternoon. So there are millions of board game cafes and board game groups, but if you want to do it through a vegan lens, so that might even mean that it's hosted in a vegan venue, so you don't have to worry about what you're going to eat while you're there for 6 hours playing Magic the Gathering or whatever shit you're playing, like it's it's about creating safe spaces for people. Like we have a queer open mic. And I know that some of these things you could argue aren't protected characteristics that are in danger, such as being queer, but it is part of people's identity or lived realities that they want to celebrate or feel nurtured within. So a vegan rugby club does that. But yeah, it doesn't stop it from being problematic. Just like with the queer open mic, like there are things that we have done in that event where we could have done better to be more inclusive. Just because it was a queer open mic, it didn't mean that it was the most inclusive event in the world. Like we used to host it in an event with no lift, and so if you had accessibility issues with stairs, you couldn't come into the event. I mean that, thankfully now we're in a venue that is wheelchair friendly, and has accessible toilets.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so any event that there can be pros and cons for both things. I can see the problems with a rugby team. I can see problems with a vegan rugby team, but I can also see benefits from it as well.
And how did the rugby team do, Sean? That's the most important.
They got absolutely smashed by the non-vegans, I think. Well, I left.
So any shred of activism was not quickly undone.
Not really. I think from my what do you call it? Like when you're just sort of a casual observer, right? Like I'm not an aficionado about rugby, but they looked as strong as the other people, but their technique wasn't there. So maybe they're a newish kind of team. They don't have the money that something like the Richmond Rugby Club, which, had its own massive stand and a clubhouse. And, this would be like a feeder club for even more professional rugby clubs. Whereas the Green Gazelles were, it's a much smaller affair. They just didn't look like they had the training or skills that the other team had. I don't think it was to do with the lack of protein.
Just to bring it back to the alcohol consumption that we were discussing earlier in the episode, the name, the Green Gazelles, does make me think of a particular episode in your drunken past. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Where I embodied the spirit of a gazelle
in Las Vegas
while we were out drinking in Las Vegas, and I tried to jump over a hedge outside a casino or back behind a hotel off the strip, and I tried to leap like a gazelle, and I caught my leg like a gazelle on a barbed wire fence
in a snare trap
and cut my leg. It was funny, like watching some of these players sort of hobbling off the field yesterday. It was quite amusing I kept thinking of that. Like I thought I was a gazelle and I was, felled by a fence or a snare. And then I saw these gazelles hobbling off the field. I felt a strange affinity with them.
You felt connection. So you're thinking of joining the Green Gazelles? You trying out for the Green Gazelles?
No, and this is another weird thing. Obviously I'm not fit enough and I'm too old, but I also feel too queer. Like, even though this was a progressive sporting team in the fact that they were existing outside of the norm themselves, I also felt outside of that. Like, it didn't look like, I obviously don't know who's queer and who's not just by looking at them. But, no one was voguing at half time.
You say that, but no, okay. I'm joking.
Yeah, but, nobody was presented as a particularly queer person. It was still all that macho sort of body language and presenting. And so I felt like, I wouldn't. Also, I don't want to get hit that hard by anybody. Like, sitting there in the stands, I could hear people slamming into each other, like cracking sounds. And I was just like, that once would happen to me, and that would be it. I'd be gone. There's absolutely no way. I'm going to have to stick with indoor badminton with Jimbo.
And some swimming as well.
Oh, yeah, my swimming. Although I think I need to get a bit more established as a swimmer, because I'm very much like, I just sort of paddle up and down like an obese frog, like going up and down the pool. But I actually need some technique, because for swimming to be really beneficial for your health and toning your body or whatever, you have to swim with a certain technique, right? You have to use different muscles.
I just think getting in the water and just moving your body, and the sort of the mental health benefits, the relaxation that brings.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm not saying it's worthless.
Fine. Yeah.
I'm not saying it's worthless, but
it depends
I think
what your goals
I could be doing
are.
a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
Because also, you've got to get your heart rate up with exercise for it to be beneficial.
Well, yeah, but again, it depends what your goal is. If you're using it as a relaxation tool, then I don't think that matters. But anyway,
I've been prescribed by the NHS that I need to start doing a gym routine to help with my weight loss and my overall health. And I'm really nervous about going to the gym. I don't care about, jumping in the pool with no shirt on and all of that. But there's something about the gym that worries me a bit. I don't know if it's a judgment thing, or other people are going to see that I don't know how to use the equipment, or I'm starting on the lowest weights. I don't know. I don't really care what anyone thinks about me. But there's something about the unknown of the gym that feels a little bit intimidating.
It's a bit of an intimidating environment, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But you can start doing things at home. You don't have to go to the gym to start building muscles.
Well, I've been given this sort of prescription schedule that I have to do, and it's using equipment that's in the gym.
Okay.
So I'm also not very self-determined around stuff like that. Like, I need a prescription. Like, I need someone to say, do this, numbers 1 to 10, and then repeat it these 3 days a week. Right. I need that instruction to stay on track.
Well, speaking of prescriptions, I'm afraid I'm going to have to get out of here and go and get my medication before it's given away to somebody else.
Skedaddle to the NHS. Make like a gazelle and get down there.
Like a green gazelle. So, Sean, where can people find you if they want to find out what other athletic antics you're up to?
You can follow me for vegan food, vegan board games, and vegan sports teams at any platform as Fat Gay Vegan.
Great. And you can find me on, well, I say any platform, but mostly just Instagram. You can find me, Josh and the Jumpstarts, and you can now stream my debut single as well, Empty Seat, which maybe we can talk about that in a future episode. It's the theme song to this podcast, and it's about, it's about me and Sean, basically. So, yeah. We can talk about that.
We really should have talked about that. I can't believe we didn't talk about your single coming out.
Well, we can talk about that next week.
Okay.
In the meantime, get the numbers up. I need the streams. I need to get that 0.002 pence for every stream that I get. So,
well, you've got to aim at, like, Gaga's, I think, currently the 6th most streamed artist in the world with over 80 million unique monthly listeners. So you need to get up there.
I've got my work cut out for me then. But no, please do listen. Add me to your playlists. Follow me as an artist. It will help with the algorithm.
Share the song wherever you can.
Yes, exactly.
And also, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can subscribe to our channel as well. Mm-hmm. So I love when other YouTubers say smash the subscribe button, just like the Richmond rugby team smashed the Green Gazelles.
Mm-hmm. Smash the hell out of that subscribe button.
Yeah,
awful. All right, folks. Thanks so much for watching, listening, putting up with our wandering conversations,
also known as nonsense.
Yeah.
Okay,
we'll see you in your feeds next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.